Welcome back. Before we can talk about the future of Sarasota city government, let's take a look at the past. Sarasota was incorporated as a local government in 1902 and officially became a city government in 1913. It was headed by mayors until 1945, when the commission manager government form was adopted. Every April, 8 commissioners elect a mayor and vice mayor from among their members. Although these titles are ceremonial, commissioners also appoint a city manager, and that title is not ceremonial. Now a respected city commissioner says she has had enough, and she joins us now. Suzanne Atwell is an at-large commissioner for the city of Sarasota. And Commissioner, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
You didn't just say, I'm not running again. When you announced you were not running, you made a point.
Yes, definitely.
That you believe that the commission form of government is broken. Why?
Well, it's a lot of reasons, and I will admit a lot of reasons went into why I decided not to run. But I think we're not dysfunctional. We're just not functioning the way I believe we should be. There has been, for the last few years, culminating now into decisions that are being made, and they're being made by a small group of very vocal people that are affecting and hijacking policy. Our commission is not doing anything about that. And that's the part that I have trouble dealing with right now.
Well, is that a matter of who is on the commission today, or is that a matter of the commission form of government? Would it be any better or worse if you had a strong mayor?
I think, and we can argue semantics about an elected mayor or a strong mayor. Historically, we do argue about that. I'm a firm believer right now that we need an elected mayor. You can quarrel with whether you want to call it strong or elected. We have fractured leadership. We have inappropriate leadership sometimes. We are at the point in this city where we have risen, forgive the pun, so high that this city needs to have much better leadership.
I personally believe the biggest example of this problem is how the city and the county do not deal with the homeless situation. And you go downtown this week, and there are more homeless individuals on Main Street than, and frankly, I've ever seen. And it's a bigger problem than other metropolitan areas. And the fact that the city commission and the county commission can't come up with a cohesive plan, I think, is the reason why many people believe that the city form of government is dysfunctional.
Well, I mean, we can talk about that, but what I feel is, first of all, homeless in this community is very intractable. It's a real serious problem, but it's a very intractable problem. We are doing so many things in this community, especially with the Salvation Army. Our part, and as our city manager, the Barwin plan, what we are doing, we've just hired a homeless coordinator and a housing locator. We are doing our part. You're right. Early on, I wanted a shelter. I was with the county commission on that. That dialogue fell apart when we became adverse to each other. The Cold War began, and we're still in the Cold War.
In fact, you wrote about that in your op-ed piece
Yes.
in the newspaper, and I want to read some of it. The relationship between the city commission and the county commission has never been easy, but it has become toxic. You go on to say the reasonable difference on this issue, however, has been the subsumed by the deterioration and the destructive personal relationship between both boards. I do not believe the problems are due to partisan differences between the two commissions. Both bodies allowed personal animus to obstruct the obvious need to work together. That's an indictment not only of the city commission, but also the county commission.
Sure, sure. I mean, mea culpa on both sides. We have some people that start this kind of, and I don't want to call it a war, but actually it is. It is a Cold War. That I, at this point in time, will tell you the professionalism of the county commission, the way they run the meeting. Obviously, they don't have mayor. They have a chair. Our fractured leadership on the county reflects things that are going on.
But let me get one more question in there, because you talk to people who are with the county commission or served on it, and they look almost with disdain at the city commission and how it's run, and they believe that the problem is with the city commission and nothing what they do.
Well, there's a lot of examples that would validate that as far as I'm concerned. A lot of the times, as you'll see, it all comes back to who is running the city of Sarasota. When you talk about major policy issues, and a few of them lately have been so egregious that it goes right back to a small group of people are hijacking these, and the county commission watches that. We don't have unanimity in some of the most powerful and important issues. As you mentioned before about the transportation chapter, that should have been unanimous. County commission is, and I have to admit this, is much more professional in their voting. Not that you can't have 3-2 votes, but these major issues that affect the community, not just one neighborhood, should be unanimous.
All right, our discussion is just getting started. We'll be joined in a moment by local government reporter from the Herald Tribune and our own director of community engagement here at ABC7. But when we return, we'll have a check on the weather forecast. Stay tuned. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the commission manager form of government that runs the city of Sarasota and whether or not it is time for a change. Our guests tonight are Zach Murdoch, local government reporter for the Herald Tribune, City Commissioner Suzanne Atwell, and Steve Sabato, ABC7's director of community engagement. And Zach, I want to begin with you because you're on the front lines. You eyewitnessed this dysfunction. I remember a couple of weeks ago, the commissioner made a recommendation to move voting for municipal elections from the spring to November, like the rest of the world. And she didn't even get a second on that motion when everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people believe that is a way to bring more voters into the process. What was the mood in the room?
Well, not to horrify you, but that was actually months ago. That's how this year has gone. It's been like that all year. And back then, there was still some tension growing throughout the year, and the air was sucked out of the room when that happened, because there were a lot of people there that night in council or commission chambers, excuse me, that very much supported the move and had testified in support of that. It was pretty evenly split throughout the course of several meetings as far as people for and against, but when Ms. Atwell didn't even get a second to discuss it after hours and hours of testimony, I think everyone's jaw hit the floor a little bit.
Is it our imagination, or is it hard to get things done through the city commission?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there is a lot of tension in a lot of these meetings because the city commission has been dealing with some really big issues this year. And don't get anyone wrong, the city still gets lots and lots of stuff done. But the things that ultimately bubble up and become whole fights or disagreements or points of conflict have been pretty steady throughout the year, and they've been pretty intense at times.
And Steve, we cover this. We also read Zach's stories. It's out there for the world to see, and it led you to write an editorial a couple weeks ago on ABC7. And what was the thrust of your thoughts?
Well, it started off because of Susan's decision not to run again, and the thrust was twofold. One, how do we recruit and retain the best and the brightest people to run our government? And the secondary point was that in light of the form of government that we have, with the districts being very focused on very small issues and the lack of an elected mayor, we don't attract or retain the best and the brightest because the job really doesn't give the authority to people to get the job done.
You know, it occurs to me that both you and I used to work in Hartford, Connecticut.
That is correct.
And when we worked there, at least the first time, it was a weak form mayor of government. The city council had the say. It had a city manager. They changed the city charter, and they brought in a strong mayor format, and there was substantial changes in how the city was run and the development.
And there was also accountability, and I think one of the public's frustrations is the lack of accountability when decisions are made. We the public should be able to point our finger at who was responsible, and conversely, when something good happens, we should be clear about who's responsible as well. And too often, the confusion at City Hall leaves us wondering, for example, who's really responsible for the view? It's unclear, and there's just too much influence, outside influence, on the process and not enough accountability in City Hall.
But Commissioner, obviously there are good people who disagree with that, and we saw Molly Cottermone, who served on the City Commission, was mayor. She is dedicated to the city, but yet she says she does not see a problem with how we run our government here and what does and does not get done. Have you talked to her about this?
No, I mean, over the years, yes. And you know, Molly, just to preface, former Mayor Cardamone, she was one of the first people I talked to when I ran for office back in 2005. I got some great words of wisdom. Here we disagree. I know often Mayor Cardamone has often talked about you can't touch our charter. Well, I'm one that does not believe that a city's charter or the Constitution of the United States, for that matter, is sacrosanct in that we can't have amendments. We wouldn't have the 19th Amendment. There are a lot of, we have 27 amendments. I think we need to have it more organic, and we have reached that point. Molly said, I think she said in your promotion piece, I can't imagine one person running this city. Well, that's not what's going to happen. It's one person running the city. You're getting someone that will be elected, and I hope, by all of us, all of the electorates, and not just a few neighborhoods, if we ever got to that point again where we could have an elected mayor. And that you would get a broad section of people that would come in, yes, from both parties, whatever. That's what's happening, that we're narrowing the scope so that you use the word confusion. The public is confused about what you just voted on because only one person from that neighborhood talked about it, and even though everybody else spoke to it, what happened? What happened with the commission? So,
Zach, when we started our conversation with the commissioner, we talked about the relationship with the county commission and how the commission views the county commission and vice versa. What do you see out there? What are people involved with the county commission saying when they think of Sarasota city government?
Well, Suzanne's right. There is a big difference between the two types of meetings, and there are weeks where I'll spend my Monday night with the City Commission and enter an entirely different world on Tuesday and Wednesday with the County Commission. And county commissioners, they kind of keep their cards close to their vests about that. No one really wants to speak openly about the discord between the two commissions, but it's certainly clear that the county commissioners intend on holding themselves up to a kind of higher standard as far as how they want to conduct meetings and how they would like to maintain communication between the two.
But you do get the sense that they view the city commission with some measure of disdain.
Well, certainly, and there's a good example of that in the argument between the city and county over the downtown community redevelopment.
Oh my gosh, we did a whole show on that.
Yes.
And you could probably do 2 or 3 more, but the way that fight broke out over the course of a couple of months with intense city meetings, with some pretty specific blame on the county and some kind of personal stuff came back that way.
Steve, I asked the commissioner this very question, and she said no. She said it was not the case in her op-ed piece, but I'm wondering if this is a partisan issue because the city commission is mostly Democrat and the county commission is all Republican, and doesn't so many things in our public life come down to that these days?
Well, you know, that's it would seem that it's hard to do anything anymore without political implications. But I would suggest that this may be bigger than this is. I think what we're seeing here is a fundamental change in the city of Sarasota. We're going through an unprecedented growth development spurt with over 1,000 condominium units, 1,000 apartment rental units, and the fact is that we're becoming a destination, a metropolitan destination, and frankly, in many ways, we have outgrown our form of government, and we've certainly outgrown the capacity of some of the people, particularly when we have such small numbers elected in district offices with small voter turnout. We really need a more representative form of government so that not just the people who have their own. We have this drawbridge mentality, particularly from residents of downtown Sarasota. Just because you live in downtown Sarasota doesn't mean you own or should be able to direct policy. This is a metropolitan destination, not just for the county, but frankly for the entire southwest part of the state of Florida. So we've outgrown and are in a very exciting, positive time with great things happening, but we're being held back, I think, by a very provincial form of government.
So, Commissioner, your departure, does that mean that you are, at least in the short term, giving up on the idea or hope that anything can really change?
Well, that's a really good question. No, I will never give up that idea. I want to go, and to that point, advice to the candidates that are slowly emerging before the cutoff date, some advice that I'd give them that there is a real difference between campaigning and governing. When you campaign on the edges. If you vote for me, I'll wipe out parking meters. If you vote for me, I'll end homelessness in a year. And then if you're lucky enough to win and you're sitting on the dais with the other 4 commissioners, you have to govern, and you must govern from the center, or you're not going to be, otherwise you will be doing what I worry about is happening now, that you're voting in a small block of community leaders, but they're a very small minority.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll have final thoughts from our guest in a minute. Welcome back. Should Sarasota change its form of government or maintain the status quo? Our guests join us now for final thoughts. So, Zach, you cover the commission every day. What are you seeing in there, or do you see any hope that things will change?
I do see hope, and I hate to be a cynical person that thinks things just grind to a halt. I would make the case that we've gone through a lot of tough decisions this year as a city, and that's not going to stop. But that what we might call dysfunction is really more disagreement that the commissioners and 2 potentially new commissioners could very well work out as we go through the election season.
And Steve, I take from what you've been saying, what we're lacking here in Sarasota is kind of like the vision thing.
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts are we're very fortunate that we live in this beautiful city. There are so many positive things going on here. Until the leadership of the Republican and Democratic Party decides that they want to have a change in the form of government here, it's probably not going to change.
Well, Commissioner, we're going to give you the last word because you certainly deserve it. We appreciate your contribution to the city and your time in government here. What do you want viewers to take away from this conversation?
Oh, I just want to say, first and foremost, it's been a privilege and an honor to have been mayor 2 years, vice mayor, and the rest of the time an at-large commissioner for 8 years. It's a privilege. And many, many reasons went into this, but as we've all discussed today, it's interesting that I'm a believer that this town has gotten to the status that you cannot continue, like you said, that we pull up the ladder. Many of the votes that we talk about and on the commission have to do with, I want to maintain my neighborhood the way it was. I want to maintain the walkways and the streets the way it was. And a lot of that is, a lot of the STOP group does that. And I know we haven't mentioned that, but that's, I want to, some of the words to the public as we move on, I would be very careful of that. STOP is not an acronym. It means stop. I am very concerned that you have, again, self-appointed people that are coming to try to deconstruct things, change things, not for the greater good. The important thing is whoever is elected, you have to look beyond the city, beyond the county, to the entire region. Every decision you make affects the entire community.
And we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all for joining us
Thank
tonight.
you.
Zach Murdoch covers the local government for the Herald Tribune. Suzanne Atwell is the at-large commissioner on the Sarasota City Commission, and Steve Sabato is the director of community engagement for ABC7.